What up, and welcome back to IDP Plus Trends, offensive waiver wires for Week 15. On this episode, we're going to talk some quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends who can help you in Week 15. So, first and foremost, congratulations. If you're here right now, you're probably in a fantasy football matchup somewhere, someplace, somehow. So, hats off to you. It's a long season. Not many people are still with it, still watching videos, still doing the research. So, big ups to you. Hopefully, it's a big advantage. So good luck in your matchups this week. We're going to start it off looking at the quarterback position. Hopefully you're not streaming quarterbacks in the fantasy playoffs, but if you are, Jameis Winston may be a good option for you. Only owned in 34% of Yahoo leagues. Was not great, was not horrible last week, week 14, in a rough matchup versus Pittsburgh. Jameis is no stranger to bad matchups. The last 4 games have been bad matchups for him, but he's rose to the occasion with 1,300 passing yards, 8 touchdowns with 6 interceptions, and 54 rushing yards with a rushing touchdown. So, first and foremost, last 4 games, 1,300 passing yards. That number pops off the charts, averaging over 300 yards over the last 4. Yeah, 2 spike weeks. Week 11 versus New Orleans, 395 yards passing in that game. Week 13 versus Denver, we won't forget it, 497 yards. But the floor, he has the upside. Look at the floor. 0 games under 210 passing yards since being the starter. So to me, there is one game Jameis did not throw for a touchdown, but other than that, every game he's had at least one passing touchdown, and the yardage looks great. I do think that Kansas City, even though not much, I do think it's a better matchup than Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is very stingy against the defense, and this was an AFC North matchup. So anytime that happens when the AFC North teams get together, just throw your projections out the window and just see what the weather brings that day. So, Jameis Winston, get out of the AFC North. Go ahead and stay at home. You're playing in Cleveland, but you're playing Kansas City. I think it's a better matchup, and I expect Jameis Winston to maybe show 250 yards. Whether he gets a passing touchdown or 2 is the coin flip for me. So, I think Jameis Winston, this game has doubtability to it. It could be a kind of AFC North game, even though it's not against the Steelers, the Ravens, or the Browns. I'm sorry, Bengals. But to me, I think just because Kansas City's going to be up, Jameis Winston's going to throw the ball off and pile up the passing yards. And I hope Cedric Tillman can come back. That would be a great boom to his fantasy stock. But all in all, he's looked good with Elijah Moore, especially with Jerry Jeudy and Njoku. So I think Jameis Winston is top 10, top 12 upside this week. Great stream if you're in that spot. Next, I don't think this guy can endorse him as a top 10 or top 12, but only owned in 6% of Yahoo leagues. For those of you in very deep, maybe 2 quarterback leagues, I think you can roll out Bryce Young this week with confidence. Did you know out of the 8 full games Bryce Young has played this year, only one of them he's had a top 12 matchup? 5 out of the 8 have been bottom 8 matchups. Those are 2 games versus New Orleans, a game versus the Chargers, Chicago, Denver. These are bad matchups for quarterbacks. Bad teams to play. So 2 of them have been middle of the road. Those were the Giants and the Chiefs, and one was a juicy top 5 matchup with Tampa Bay Week 13. As a matter of fact, it was his best game, coincidentally, of the season. 298 passing yards with a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown in that game. So broke almost 25 points, broke 20 points in that game. Probably the only time I think he's done it this season. But Bryce Young has definitely upped the ante a little bit with that offense, just the chemistry he's had. Jatavian Sanders, I know he's been down and out for the past couple weeks, but before that has shown tremendous rapport with Bryce Young, and I think he's back healthy now for the second week. They continue to find success with Adam Thielen. Xavier gets there. Things are gelling right now in Carolina, and I think it's just right time, right place. We just saw Joe Burrow drop 370 and 3 touchdowns versus Dallas in Dallas. Now that's who is coming to play Bryce Young this week. So I think it's a great matchup, great storm. I'm not saying he's Joe Burrow, but I think he has a great matchup here, and it's a great opportunity for Bryce Young to have his 4th game for over 15 points, and maybe we can get another 20-point game here. I'm expecting about 250 passing yards with a touchdown. I think 2 would be the absolute ceiling here, but 250 with a touchdown or 2 is more than playable, especially if you're in a super flex. So I think even though he's not a top 10 or top 12 upside play this week, Bryce Young, especially in 2 quarterback leagues, is going to be a safe play, and I think he has better upside than we mostly realize. Playing for a bad Carolina team, so this is the week to start him. Moving on to running back, first and foremost, we know the player that we're all going to add this week, probably universally, is Patrick Taylor, owned in 6% of Yahoo leagues. Isaac Guerendo did not practice today. Today is Tuesday, so it's not looking good. There's a short turnaround. The San Francisco 49ers play the Rams on Thursday, so not a lot of time for Guerendo to get right. So I think Patrick Taylor this week, we saw him have 7 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown in garbage time versus Chicago. But I do think he'll be a solid flex play due to the volume. I know they have Israel Abinakanda, and I bet he does get involved. He's younger. They want to see what they have in him. I do think that, Patrick Taylor, even though we haven't seen much of him, I do think they would trust him more than Abinakanda, and he would get the majority of the volume. I'm not predicting where this game's going to go. The Rams and the San Francisco 49ers. Maybe the Rams can get up, and Patrick Taylor kind of needs to be used as a passing back. But whatever the usage is, I expect Patrick Taylor, whether it be PPR or non-PPR, to be a good play. I mean, we saw Isaac Guerendo last week, scored 2 touchdowns, monster game. So if he's out, Patrick Taylor, I don't know if he has exactly that upside in this given week, but I do expect him to get volume and be a viable, solid flex play for you, especially in deeper leagues. So I think Patrick Taylor's the guy we ought to get. And if it's not him, you're maybe looking at somebody like Tank Bigsby, owned in 46% of Yahoo leagues. Bigsby last week, 18 carries for 55 yards and a touchdown versus Tennessee. Only 4 carries for Travis Etienne in that game too. So seems like, the thing we've all known is that Tank Bigsby is the more efficient, more powerful runner. Finally, it looks like the Jaguars have reflected that. He looks like the team's RB1. He gets an even better matchup this week versus the Jets, who allow more rushing yards and rushing touchdowns on the season than the Tennessee Titans. I think he's a solid RB3 or flex based on his volume. Given he's very game script dependent, understand that. Like if you play Tank Bigsby and they're losing, it's not going to be pretty because he's not a avid passing back. So Travis Etienne probably is the receiving back at this point. If they're down in that game, it's not looking good for Tank Bigsby, and Etienne's probably going to be the guy. But if this game can stay in flux, I assume they want to run the ball. They don't have Trevor Lawrence. Of course, we're going to see Mac Jones start, so they probably want to get ahead and run the ball and show their dominance there. So Tank Bigsby, if he can get somewhere near that 15 to 18 carries that he got last week, I think he's a fine flex RB3 for you this week. Moving on, next guy I want to talk about, we cannot talk about Braylon Allen because he's owned in 58% of leagues. So that gives us Isaiah Davis. We can still talk about him, owned in 11% of Yahoo leagues. 10 carries, 40 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown last week. Also caught 3 receptions on 6 targets for 27 yards. The split was about even as far as the workload. Both running backs logged 22 passing routes. I think he was much better than Braylon Allen, though. This week he's got a top 10 matchup versus Jacksonville. And if both of these guys are healthy and Breece Hall is out, I prefer Davis at this point. But this is all based on Breece Hall being out. I mean, it's very likely that he could be again. This was the same knee that he tweaked, that he had surgery on. And this is a centerpiece of their offense for the rebuilding Jets. So there's a good shot, realistically, that Breece Hall, whether it be we're going to rule him out for the rest of the season right now or just, rule him out every week, like that could be a definite possibility. And we're not even talking week 16, 17, semis. We're just looking at here, right now, week 15. Isaiah Davis, can he get you by? So if you rode confidence, if you start him, you're probably in a very deep league. Kudos to you. I think you got something good here for week 15, and we'll see if that can roll into something else. But so Isaiah Davis at only 11% of Yahoo leagues. Of course, that number is going to spike as it should. And this is, again, dependent on Breece Hall's health. But if he's out, this is a big upside play. He looked better than Braylon Allen. So I think Isaiah Davis might get a 60-40 split here in week 15. So worth the money, worth the time and attention. Next guy I want to talk about, last running back, is Sincere McCormick. Talked about him before. Owned in 16% of Yahoo leagues. You're going to see that number come up too because he came off a game where back-to-back good games. He carried the ball 15 times for 78 yards with 2 receptions for 11 yards versus Tampa Bay. In week 15, he gets Atlanta. Granted, this is a worse matchup. Atlanta only has allowed 7 rushing touchdowns versus Tampa Bay's 12. But I do expect Sincere McCormick to get his 15 to 18 carries, just like Tank Bigsby. I think this is proven that he is an efficient runner. He is good for the team. Zamir White, maybe because he's been so good, Zamir White is on IR now. He's not going to be a factor. And as a matter of fact, Alexander Madison, I'm not even sure he's going to be a factor coming back, whether he comes back this week or not. Even if he does, I think that just the efficient. He's only had a just over 3 yards per carry this year, Madison, and I think Sincere McCormick going 27 carries for 142. That's over 5 yards a carry. So anytime you're averaging 5 yards a carry or more, you're probably going to keep continuing to get the ball. So Sincere McCormick, this is a tougher matchup. Yardage allowed this week versus Atlanta, and to take a look at last week versus Tampa Bay, matchup as far as rushing yardage is about the same, so that's kind of good. But overall, looking forward to seeing Sincere McCormick getting another 15 to 18 carries versus Atlanta, and that's all we can really ask for. And he's been efficient doing it. So if you're in a deeper league, great running back great dart throw to throw out there. Moving over to the wide receiver position, the first guy I want to talk about, mentioned it before, Cedric Tillman. Just want to make sure he's owned, especially if you're in a deeper league. Continue to stash him. He's still in protocol. No guarantees to play this week, but we do know he's a very high upside play. He's playing Kansas City this week. I think it would be a good matchup if he's able to return. Right now, Jerry Jeudy may be the safer fantasy play, but again, I think Cedric Tillman may be the better player overall, and that might translate to be the better fantasy play with time, whether it be this year or next. Cedric Tillman, 6 catches, 75 yards, and a touchdown and 11 targets versus the Chargers. And this is about the same kind of matchup. Chiefs, I respect them. They're a good team. Good coaching, good players, good scheme. So I call this about a similar matchup as that LA Chargers matchup. And again, 11 targets, 6 catches, 6 for 75 yards, and a touchdown in that game. Like, even if it's a tough game, Jameis Winston's shown he can throw the ball tremendously often, at least. So, I understand if you don't want to use a claim on Cedric Tillman because of the uncertainty, but at the same time, he should not be a free agent come noon on Wednesday when waivers clear. If you do not want to burn a claim on him, please be on it early and stash him, because whether it's this week or next week, I do think Cedric Tillman is going to help fantasy teams again. Again, only owned in 33% of leagues, so more of a stash play there with Tillman. But if you're looking for a guy who I think might be a better play this week, all things considered, health considered, I think is Quentin Johnson, only owned in 40% somehow of Yahoo leagues. Last week, no Lad McConkey. We saw Quentin Johnson have 7 targets, 5 catches for 48 yards and a touchdown. And he gets a juicy top 10 matchup this week versus Tampa Bay. No way around it. Usually he's touchdown dependent, but this week he may have some volume too. McConkey is dealt and is continuing to deal with a multitude of injuries. Who knows if he's going to make it back? And even if he does and he's banged up, maybe Quentin Johnson can get more targets, more receptions because of that. So I think Quentin Johnson is a really underrated play. I would consider him a high upside wide receiver 3. And if you're looking for somebody to immediately help at wide receiver, I think this is the guy you want to go for if he's available. And finally, maybe he's not available. You look at a guy like Jalen McMillan. I'll take my little victory lap because I talked about him a couple weeks ago. I didn't talk about him last week, so I wasn't, steadily so high on him. But we saw the, thing we were waiting for. We saw the excitement the potential that could have been there the whole time as being the number 2 receiver for Baker Mayfield in that Tampa Bay offense ever since they lost Chris Godwin. So it finally clicked. Wasn't exactly, yardage and targets and receptions. He did have 7 targets, caught 4 of them for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. The 2 touchdowns were the highlight of his week. He gets it a little tougher sledding this week 15 versus the Chargers. I think it's a tough matchup, but he's a big play threat and volume. Seems to be what we wanted. Got 7 targets last week. Hopefully he can get somewhere between 8 and 10. Hopefully 8 or more targets would be nice. Keep that floor high for us. But overall, as it stands right now, I do consider him a low floor, but a high ceiling wide receiver 3 or a flex. Probably not going to start him in 10 or 12 man leagues, but if you're in a 16, 18 man league, I think Jaleel McLaughlin, there's not really too many great options. Quentin Johnson in that deep league is probably owned. So Jaleel McLaughlin, if he's available, if you need somebody, maybe you're dealing with injury, I do think he's a viable play for the rest of the season, not only week 15, but the rest of the season. So Jaleel McLaughlin, victory lap, continue to do good for us, and we'll draft you high next year. Moving on to our final section here, tight ends. First guy I want to talk about is Zach Ertz, owned in 44% of Yahoo leagues. He's had a touchdown in his last 3 games. Also over those last 3 games, 21 targets, 15 catches for 120 yards, which is an average of 7 targets per game, 5 catches, and 40 yards. Pretty solid, 9-10 points a game. I think that's what he's going to do this week. I think he'll have volume. It seems to have decent volume over the last couple of weeks, and they are hurting for playmakers, passing the ball behind Terry McLaurin there in Washington. So Zach Ertz in a good spot if you're streaming tight ends. I do think he's a volume play, but just keep in mind his opponent this week, New Orleans, has only allowed 1 tight end touchdown in 2024. So it's going to be tough for him to continue that streak and make it 4 for 4. Maybe that's not the case, but at least I do think he will have that volume. So I think Zach Ertz is a fine stream here, and I think he's somebody who can break the mold and make it 4 for 4 potentially. So like him, and I also like Hunter Henry, owned in 40% of Yahoo leagues. Hunter Henry maybe a little bit safer play, maybe not high as upside, but 26 targets, 18 catches, and 182 yards over the last 3 games. So bottom line, we're looking at a high volume target guy in a tough matchup versus Arizona. Arizona has only allowed 10 catches and 87 receiving yards to tight ends over the last 2 weeks, which is an average of 5 catches and 42.5 yards. So this is not a great matchup for Hunter Henry. But again, just like Zach Ertz, he should have volume on his side, and his volume should be able to keep his head above water. So I do think Hunter Henry is a fine stream this week. But that wasn't all of my picks. We are done for this video. But if you'd like to continue and look at all of my offensive and IDP waiver wire pickups for week 15, check me out on Twitter at JohnnyFreakinF1. If you like what I had to say in this video, please drop a comment, ask me a question. I'll get back to you. In best of luck in your week 15 playoff matchups. As always, we will look forward. Thank you for rocking with me, and we will look forward to having you back in week 16. So again, good luck in your fantasy matchups, and bless up.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.